All right, so we have the Air Express wing getting pretty close to ready to prep for paint. Now, when I say pretty close, there's still quite a bit of work to do, but maybe you can see that we have a pretty smooth surface, pretty smooth looking wing, essentially. Here. And you see how the wings, how I filled in the wing. This is layered up 3/32 material. So there were, I think, let's see, 2 pieces of 3/32 on the top, and then I had to, on this side, I had to add a bit of 16th inch balsa here, and this is the remainder of that, just this little bit here, where the stack 3/32 was just coming up just a little bit short of the end of the rib here on this side. Now, not the case on this side. I'm not sure. I couldn't really see why that was happening. It looked like the wingtip structure was symmetrical, but just for whatever reason, we just need just a little bit more material. And as you can see, that 16th was sanded down almost all the way through. There's not much of that was needed. But I thought, rather than shaving into this rib and getting a flat spot here, I just built it up and sanded down to the rib. And then as we continue to surface this, there's some, again, overall reduction as we do that. And our 3/32 thick infill pieces, obviously we could sand into this pretty far and still have a substantial amount of material here, which is the case. The sanding I'm doing is with this 3M paper, and I want to say this is probably 180, starting with 180 and then down to 220 grit, and then overall I'm polishing it with the 400 grit wet dry, but I'm just dry sanding it. We've had, let's see, 3 applications of the spackle paste on each side, top and bottom, and 1 application of the sand and seal from Deluxe. And this product, this stuff here, going on after the spackle paste has been applied and sanded, works as a really efficient sealer. Now, after it has dried, I've sanded it almost all the way off. But that said, it still penetrates a little bit, and you can feel it, the difference in the balsa material once that stuff's been applied, dried, and then sanded. So you might be able to pick up 1 or 2 little rough spots. Some of this looks like a void or a divot, but it's not. It's just a discoloration of the underlying rib where they were laser cut. In some cases that's pretty pronounced, and when you look at it on camera, when you can't actually feel how smooth that is, it looks like there's a depression there, like it's scalloped or hollow there, but it's not. It's just kind of an optical thing. And you can see when I mark the X's on the leading edges, I don't know if you can pick those up on the camera, but you can still see those. So ultimately, you can tell we're not taking a whole hell of a lot of material off, even as we sand onto this. And I've been, each round of sanding that I do is, anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes of continuous sanding. And as you can see, obviously the stringers and the tops of the ribs are visible, but you can see where we haven't gone through the filler, and then again where we have in a few places like here, over here, and various places. But so there's really no concern for sanding through our infill pieces. Now, sanding through the glue line is a different matter. And you saw how when I laid this up, we laid up the center underwing this way and the center here, and then flipped it over so that we could then reapply glue on both sides of each infill piece here. And then we installed the 3 rows down the leading edge on the top surface, and then flipped our wing over and applied glue to the underside of each of these. And then we applied the I want to say it was the trailing edges here, and again glued both sides of those, and then got the leading edges in. Now those were a little bit tricky because this was already infilled. So, but by doing that method, we were able to pretty much top and bottom glue both sides of the wing, top and bottom glue each piece of infill on both surfaces of the wing, top surface and under surface. And that's helpful to get a good bond here. I'm not concerned about press through anywhere on here. So anyway, there's that. And again, as you can see, these X's that I use to locate the leading edge, or in this case here, the trailing, I was holding the wing this way while installing these pieces here. That's why these X's are referring to this stringer. But in almost every other, in every other case, I use the leading edge or that, as a point of reference when I mark these X's on here. Anyway, so you can see you can still see them. That gives you an indication of how really little material we've actually taken off, even though I've been sanding, pretty vigorously to get through that filler, and also to sand through the initial coating of my sand and seal product. So, what's next? Well, we're going to be applying one more layer of spackle paste overall. That's the Sherwin-Williams shrink-free spackle paste. There it is. And so we'll be applying one more layer of that on both the top and bottom surfaces of this wing. And the idea then is we want to clean up some of this stuff, some of the little voids and chiggers and areas where the sandpaper has actually pulled a bit of material. We don't want that. So that's where we're at on the wing. So as we're proceeding on the wing, I'm going to be peeling off the plan that I have here and putting up the wing strut plan diagrams that show the length and shape of our fuselage to wing support struts. As you all know, this is a parasol wing, which means it sits off of the fuselage. Sits about an inch or so high on top of the fuselage. Doesn't sit directly on it. It's not fastened to the fuselage. It's on a pedestal. It's a parasol wing. So I'll be fabricating those struts. That's the next kind of major step. And for that, we'll be using some of probably the airfoil shaped aluminum strut material that I get from Precision Metals. I may use that stuff. I got to see how well I can fabricate these using that. If it's a problem, if it's not as easy as I'm hoping it'll be, then I'll use balsa struts over piano wire cores. But I think I should be able to use the airfoil strut material and fabricate to the plan pretty well. I'm hopeful. And then what we'll do is we'll get those fastened into the fuselage, not into the wing, but into the fuselage symmetrically using a gauge that'll set the angles of those. So we'll just cut out a gauge that wraps the fuselage and then has the proper incidence. So we'll set up a gauge to attach those struts to the fuselage and glue them in. And then what I'll be doing is where the piano wire cores come up about maybe, I don't know, eighth of an inch or even a little more than that, 3/32, they'll protrude up above the top of the airfoil, and those act like pins. So those piano wire cores will act like pins that'll go into the locating holes that we're going to put in the bottom of the wing, which will be probably set fairly wide and probably towards the front third and the rear third of each of these planks. You see the planks that we applied to the wing initially that correspond to the plan method of attaching the upper wing to the fuselage. I went ahead and put those planks in, and then what we're going to do is just we'll be drilling some holes. Now the piano wire I'll be using is probably just going to be, you know, the typical, maybe it's I don't know what that stuff is, it's probably 2 millimeter piano wire, maybe less than that, 1.5 millimeter piano wire, something about probably like this. So what I'll probably do is drill 1/8 inch holes, or maybe not quite that big, but they'll be oversized in comparison to the piano wire. And what that'll do is it'll give me some room to move the wing and get it, you know, square to the fuselage, and also to get it, you know, so that it's not cocked this way on the airplane. You know, so we don't want it rotating this way or this way, and we don't want it, you know, obviously too much incidence or tilt, you know, and we don't want the wing cocked. So there's, you know, all three of those axes that we have to pay attention to. But if we open the holes up a little bit, it'll give us room to fit the wing properly. At least that's how it should work in theory. And then obviously once we have it tacked, we'll be able to then flip the airplane inverted and liberally apply probably the super glue and really fix the wing on there properly. Right, so that's those are the next steps here, is to finish prepping this, getting it sanded and surfaced, and then once that's done, fabricating the fuselage to wing struts. And once the struts are in place on the fuselage, then the fuselage will be prepped and painted. Get that primered, well, surfaced first, and then primered with white, and then we'll get the racing white onto the fuselage, and we'll get some of the NATO black onto the firewall. We'll do that probably first and then mask the firewall. And then we'll mask the tail surfaces for the red trim, and we'll mask the wheel pants for their red trim, and we'll spray the red trim, and then we'll come back and do a little bit more sanding and finishing for the wing. I want the wing to be just as smooth and polished as the fuselage is now, so that's going to be still many steps. But this is, we're well on the way here. This is probably about 50% towards surface completion. All right, so and then we'll do the same process to the wing that we've done on the fuselage. I'll probably even, who knows? I mean, I'll probably want to get all of the decals and insignia onto the fuselage, and then we'll prep and paint and decal the wing, and give everything a couple of coats of the semi-gloss clear that I use, and then do final assembly, just tack the wing onto the airplane. Probably give it after that one more clear coat overall, just to make sure everything matches. And then we'll set the windscreen on, and we'll be done. So this project is getting close. Not as close as it usually is when I say that, but it's been a while on this one, and it's been interrupted, and you know, I tend to have difficulty if I leave a project for any period of time and then try to get back into it. That's not easy for me. I haven't done that very often. Usually when I get sidetracked on a project, or something else comes up that takes me off of it, I almost never really get back into it, and really no matter how far along it is sometimes. But in this case, you know, it wasn't too hard. I want to see this thing completed. I've got some air traffic coming over. Can you hear that? Quite a few power adjustments there. It's a little bit stormy out, and when it's stormy and the wind's blowing offshore, the planes come in over. They do their approach over the house instead of their departures. And when it's stormy like this and there's crosswinds, and you really hear them getting on and off the power to keep that thing on the glide slope. And I sure hope they keep it on the glide slope, because if they don't, I'll be the first and last one to know it. Anyway, that's our project where we're at today. And as you see, we're getting there. You know, we're getting there finally on the Air Express project, and it's been fun. I'm enjoying reading up on Lockheed Aircraft. This was their first successful airplane. It was literally their first airplane once Lockheed was established as Lockheed. You know, this was their first big effort, and it was just a hammer. The Lockheed Air Express project aircraft in all of its iterations was just a champion right off the bat. I mean, they had a little bit of a rough start with the Dole race to Hawaii. They lost that airplane. Nobody really knows why. But it didn't stop anybody from recognizing that it was the best thing in the sky. And you know, it takes a Lockheed to beat a Lockheed was the phrase that was coined after this airplane flew. In some of the exhibitions, it would take a Lockheed to beat it. It was that good. So yeah, it's a fun project. It's a beautiful airplane, and I hope it turns out that way. I hope I can get it completed and and do the company proud, and Roscoe Turner, who was a character. You know, some people liked him, some people didn't. But the more you learn about this guy, the funnier it is. The guy was just a real character. So anyway, this is where we're at, and so